Okay, so here is our introduction to the cell. We have gone over this in class, but here's just a video so you're able to reference back to it in case you want to hear the information again. So for this presentation, this is over everything we are doing for cell theory. There's stuff in this that we won't talk about for a couple weeks, but I need you to get your mind fresh with it because it's tough material. So when we're talking about cell theory is like the overarching idea, and there's 3 components to it. The first component is all living things are made out of cells. Cells carry out functions needed to support life, and cells come only from other living things. So let's break that down. Number 1, all living things are made of cells. Every single thing that is living is made out of a cell. You are made out of cells. I am made out of cells. Plants are made out of cells. Baker is made out of cells. Everything that is living is made of cells. 2, cells carry out the functions that need to support life. There are cells that have functions. Different cells have different functions. There's different parts of the cell that have different functions, and that supports life. So the goal of a cell is to support life. And the third is cells only come from other living things. Like matter, there's no way to create it. There's no way to create cells. Life and cells come from other pre-existing cells. Here's a video that talks about cell theory. I'm not going to show it here on this presentation, but I want you to go back and watch it, but we've watched this in class. If you're confused, this is a really good reference.
Hey everyone, I'm Jordan.
There we go. Okay, so the 2 main contributing scientists that brought cell theory to life, pun intended, but brought cell theory around was Anton van Leeuwenhoek, I know, Leeuwenhoek, and Robert Hooke. So Anton van Leeuwenhoek invented the microscope, but the microscope wasn't around, so how would we know what everything was made of? So his main contribution was he invented the microscope, so we were able to see the little cells. Where Robert Hooke, on the other side, made the word cell. So he made the word cell after observing quark consistencies of tiny chambers. So a quark is kind of all like little cardboards pushed together, and that's what he noticed. So Robert Hooke saw the word, like invented the term cell, but Robert van Leeuwenhoek invented the microscope to be able to see the cell. So to common knowledge today, both of these men were really big contributing scientists. Along the lines, there have been other contributing scientists along the way, and we will later learn about those, but these are the 2 main ones. Here's the discovery of the cell. It's a good little video. Again, if you're confused and want more information, please go back and watch this. It's also something that we watched in class. Okay, back to cells. So there's 2 kinds of cells. We have prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Let me say that again. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes. We'll start with prokaryotes on the left. So prokaryotes are the first cells to evolve. Think of this as like not a very complex cell. It's kind of just the basics of the cell. There's nothing really fancy. It's just a boring cell. So it's the first cells to evolve. There is no nucleus, which we'll learn later. Its hereditary info is passed within the cytoplasm. An example would be bacteria. So these are kind of like, they're not super complex, but they're still around. Then on the right-hand side, we have eukaryotes. So they've evolved from prokaryotes. So at first they were prokaryotes, but then they turned into prokaryotes. They have a nucleus. When you hear the term nucleus, think like brain, and that's the center. So they do have a brain, so that kind of shows they're a little more evolved. Their hereditary information is contained within the nucleus. So like the DNA and the stuff that makes it them is contained within that brain cell. That makes sense. Some examples would be animals, protists, fungi, and plants. Here's our 2 different kinds. As you can see, the prokaryote on the top is not as complex. It doesn't seem like there's as many parts to it, and it looks a little different. It's kind of like, imagine like a jelly bean. It's kind of that shape. It's kind of like that flat, long, not very complex. On the bottom right, we have a eukaryote that, see the center nucleus. So the thing that makes these different is this guy right here. So follow the term down, nucleus. This is like our brain control center. Next, before we even get dive deeper into cells, we need to classify living versus non-living. Sounds easy, but it could get a little complex. So non-living, they do not eat, they do not breathe, they do not move, and they do not reproduce. Those are the 4, let's say, basics of life. Let's use a rock, for example. A rock does not eat, does not breathe. Rocks don't move unless they're pushed by another force, but that's a different story, and they don't reproduce. On the right-hand side, there's living characteristics. So there we have, let's use a plant, because plants are living. They do eat. They need sunlight and water. They do breathe. They need oxygen. They do move. No, they're not like walking on their feet, but yes, they're growing, and they do reproduce. So it's our main difference between living and non-living. Here's a good video on that. Okay, so here's where we get, for the rest of the presentation, we're going to talk about cell organelles. So cell organelles are the parts of the cell. What the main stressor of organelles is that each organelle has their own function. Without that organelle in the cell, they wouldn't be able to complete their goal and their function to live. So the formal definition of a cell organelle is tiny membrane-bound structures that perform special functions in the cell. Let's focus on this term, special functions in the cell. Every part, here's all of them. We're not going to focus on all of them. But of these, all of them have a different function and a different part to complete the goal of the cell. Let's just kind of process how tiny they are. So cells are super, super, super tiny. And then now there's parts of the cell that are even tinier. For example, let's look at these little ribosomes. This cell is super tiny, and then look at how tiny these little ribosomes are in here. They're these little black dots surrounding the cell. Look at how tiny they are compared to the cell. On my screen, they just look like a little dot, and the cell is taking up the whole half the screen. So just kind of process how tiny we're talking here. First organelle that we're going to talk about is a cell wall. These are found in plant, fungal, and bacteria cells. This is the thing that like holds it all together. It's really rigid and strong. The word rigid is like stiff. So think about a house. A house can't stand without the walls. So this is the thing that kind of pulls everything together and supports the cell. It provides protection. So let's think of the walls of the house. The walls of your house are protecting you from weather and stuff like that. This is the protector. This is the thing that holds everything together. Cell wall, think of the wall of the house. This one's pretty easy to remember. Next one we have is the cell membrane. So this is the thing that surrounds the cell. So in the plant cell, it lies beneath the cell wall. So let's go back. We have our cell wall right here. Our orange would be our our yellow would be the cell membrane. So it's on the inside. In animal cells, it's the outer boundary. So like I said before, animal cells don't have that harsh outside wall, but they have the membrane. So animal cells are like a little looser, they're a little more fluid, they're not as hard. So this is their outer shell. So let's think of it like that. Yes, it's still a wall, but it's kind of like a loose wall. The cell membrane provides similar goals to the cell wall. It provides protection, control of movement, materials in and out of the cell, protection, and it maintains a condition. Think of the cell, let's relate everything back to the walls of our house. Walls of your house provide protection. They control the movement. They don't move. The walls of your house, the doors, control who comes in and who comes out, and this maintains the condition. If you have your heat on in your house, it's not going to go out to the outside because the cell walls. It's maintaining that condition within the house. Next, we have the cytoplasm. This is found in both the animal and plant cells, excuse me. This is like a thick jelly material that is located beneath the cell membrane, and it protects and supports the cell. So this is like the stuff that everything's moving around in. So on the right-hand side, we have our cell. We have our parts of the cell that are the different color blobs, but the stuff that's kind of holding it all together is the membrane, the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is like the stuff, this is like the guts of it. Like this is where everything's kind of sitting, and it provides protection to everything. This is like our roads. So the cytoplasm is how the organelles move. It connects them all, and it makes a network, and it just is that stuff inside. Next, we have the Golgi apparatus. This is found in both animal and plant cells. It looks like flattened pancakes. On 99% of diagrams, it looks like this ugly thing on the right. It looks like a stack of pancakes you'd get at like Bob Evans. The goal of the Golgi apparatus is to process and package molecules that are made by the cell. Back here. Process and package. Your cell has, these cells have goals. This is like the packager. This is like the thing that kind of puts it all together. And it's like the mover. So these are your things that like will move. If you were working in a factory, this would be like the shipping department. Think of like the Amazon trucks that you see on the sea. It processes and packages them. Next, we have our ribosomes. These are found in both plant and animal. This can be attached to the endoplasmic reticulum or can be floating free. It produces proteins and is the supplier. So think of this as your grocery store. Like this, the ribosomes are kind of what processes proteins. We need proteins to have energy, so this is like what gives the cell its fuel and its energy. As I kind of said before, they're super tiny, and they're just kind of floating around this cytoplasm. Next, we have the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER. So this is found in both plant and animal. This is a network of tubes that transport material. These can be soft or rough. The rough is on the left-hand side, and the rough is on the left-hand side, soft is on the right-hand side. This is what gets material from place to place. These are your roads. These are your highways. These are your Route 70. This is what gets material from one place to another. Yes, cells are super, super tiny, but it still needs to move material around the cell, and this is how they get there. Next, we have our mitochondria. These are found in both plant and animal cells. These look like jelly beans, and these break down energy. This is what creates the power in the cell. So you'll always hear like mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. This creates all the power. This is kind of what keeps the cell going and gives the cell life. Next, we have our vacuoles. These are found in both plant and animal cells. In plant, they're very small, but they're really very few of them, but they're larger. In animal cells, there's a lot of little ones. These are your storing of the food. So think of these as like the pantry. These are what store your food. Next, we have our lysosomes. These are found in both plant and animal. These break down larger food into smaller parts. These are like our Costco's. They are a lot of food, and you break them down into smaller things. Eats the old parts of the cell. So this is like also a recycling place. It's changing old material into new material. Think of this as like a recycling plant. Next, we have our chloroplasts. These are only found in plant cells. These are what makes plants green. So it's always a green in color. That's what gives it that green color. This is like the solar panels of the cell. So these are the things that take in the energy from the sun and transform it into food for the animal. And then here's a quick little video on kind of pulling that all together. And it's actually a song, but if you have any questions, please just refer back to this video or come see me or any of the videos in here.